Okay, so this is going to be a video on my war emergency guidebook, which is something that, it's very dodgy. Am I allowed to have this or not? I basically only got it because my uncle does painting and decorating, and he was doing the house of somebody who was obviously a relative, probably a child of people on an emergency council, and he said, oh, you can have this if I want, because I've got no interest in it. So basically, what I'll do is I'll give you a quick overview of what these sort of things were. So in Britain, as you see, this is the Wiltshire County Council one, what happened is during the Cold War there wasn't really a very good plan, but the idea was that they thought that actual proper government would be totally knocked out in obviously nuclear strikes. So the idea was that you'd have basically much smaller, probably the councils, I think they were called committees as the proper name for them, and basically an emergency committee or the governing committee was basically like police, army, some local politicians and things like that. It was basically anybody that survived in the area out of the sort of local sort of leaders, if you want to call it, would then assume the role of local government. And local government would basically be, it wouldn't take orders from higher up, it would basically make its own feudal kind of state, because as I said, Britain did not have a survival plan. So the idea was that most of these sort of groups would have had their own bunker somewhere. Some of them weren't very good bunkers at all, they were kind of just basements converted into bunkers. But for example, like you saw the one at Calvert and Hatch, that's actually a very good, competent bunker, but that was for the most important sort of one, the one that may have had like the Prime Minister and others at the time. So basically what this book is their kind of guideline books on how to be dictators once the bombs fall. Because obviously you're going to have a lot of urban violence and looting and things like this with the surviving population, because food is running out, water's running out, things like that. So the whole point of this book is basically how do you decide if you're shooting people or not and things like that. So what I'm going to say as well is some bits of the book I definitely can't show you because it's got names and addresses and contact details of people who are obviously important at the time, so you're not seeing any of that. I'll just completely cut that out of the book. Not cut it out of here obviously, but you know what I mean. Not show it in the video. There's also bits where you won't be able to read it very well because it's sort of typewritten, sort of teleprompter kind of written type thing. So because of that, some of the bits aren't very readable. So anyway, let's open it up. So what you have here first, and I'll push it along so it's kind of in frame. First you've got some information leaflets. There's one on the hydrogen bomb. Which year did this come out? 1957, and this is like the reprint done in 1963 apparently. So this is around the time Britain actually got the hydrogen bomb, because for quite a while it was just the Americans and the Soviets that had it. But obviously once Britain had developed the hydrogen bomb, Britain started building them. If you don't know the difference, hydrogen bombs are fusion bombs, atomic bombs are fission bombs. Hydrogen bombs dwarf the sort of atomic bombs in size. To give you some idea, I think sort of the Hiroshima bomb, little boy, that would be like 100th of the size or something of most of the conventional hydrogen bombs. Certainly, like 20th or 30th of the size. So hydrogen bombs were very big and scary in that regard. Most hydrogen bombs were sort of the ones at least put on ICBMs were like 2 or 3 megatons. Most of the older nuclear bombs atomic bombs, was things like 10 to 15 kilotons, 1,000 kilotons in a megaton, so that gives you some idea of the difference in power. This is a Civil Defence Handbook. It's kind of like a Protect and Survive, but a different one. But, if you sim Protect and Survive, it's a very similar thing. Because obviously, that's how interesting they've crossed this bit out. Maybe they didn't have the siren thing there. I have a bit crossed out there, but basically, it's trying to make you believe as a civilian that if you're in the way of a nuke, you might have a chance. Then another sort of big booklet on nuclear bombs, that might be quite interesting. A lot of this I haven't read in loads of detail, to be honest, but right, so here we go. Here's the start of the Wiltshire thing. So it's saying, a nuclear war is very possible. and it's going to be absolutely devastating if a nuclear war happened. What I'm going to say of this video is, if you're interested in any of the pages, just pause the video on that page, because I'm not going to stop long enough to read entire pages. So let's have a look at what's in the book. So you've got an introduction, the circumstances of a future war and appreciation. Then we've got it sorted into areas. So you've got white papers, the threat, the control system mobilisation, study law and order, which is pink papers, law and order 2, law and order 3, and I think law and order bits in this are going to interest people a bit more than some of the other bits. Health, to do with radioactivity, environmental problems, care of the sick, control of material resources, advice to the public, again, they're going to tell the public thing that's completely different than what's really going on. The community advisors in action. Community advisor, I think, was the name of like the local official who kind of ran everything. You know, it's kind of a lot of this. The thing you have to understand with a book like this is, or a folder like this, is a lot of it's kind of in British doublethink, where some of the things are made to sound as nice as possible in here, when in reality they wouldn't be. So you have to know how to read between the lines. So basically this says, like, you know, what they're doing. They are planning for the consequences of a nuclear strike on the country. There'll be no real warning to a nuclear war. The war, you know, the emergency is going to be so bad that everything's going to be cut off and you're not going to be able to communicate with people properly. Lots of the population will leave towns for the countryside, even though they tell you in Protect and Survive not to do that. But that's kind of where they might have to block roads off and shoot people trying to get out of the area prior to the bombs going off. Because basically, I think they admit somewhere in here that if you're in the countryside, you're the only people who really have a chance of surviving, but if you're in the cities, they don't want you leaving the cities and putting further strain on the countryside, so the idea is that they keep you kettled in to be wiped out, essentially, so at least some people survive. Hazards such as radioactivity. You know, 3 or 4 weeks there may not be actually proper law and order. You know, there's only going to be 48 hours of potentially nuclear strikes, and that's it. Everything's wiped out. That the scale of destruction, fire and death will be very heavy and widespread, but that overall the majority of the population will survive the attack, and most of the country will be habitable and capable of supporting life. You see, this is the bit where that doesn't sound quite right though, does it? Yes, obviously, if only cities and a couple of military targets were hit in Britain, that might be true, but obviously if you consider the size of several megaton bombs going off all across Britain, a massive amount of the population is going to be killed. There will be radioactive fallout in places, damaging things, and if you end up getting a nuclear winter due from the Cold War going hot, that might be the end of almost everything. Right, let's move on. Okay, so here's a bit on you know, more sort of type-ups of things. As you can see, some of this is very faded with the printing. Some of this is kind of like stuff we've already seen before in here. I don't know why it comes up several times, but... Okay, so this is where they obviously had a little get-together in their council meeting and scrawled with a bit of pen to say things. I can't really read the cursive writing. But, whatever. Let's skip ahead. Okay, so, this is saying the order of events they think are probably going to happen. If you've watched Threads, this is like the entire build-up to the strike. It would not surprise me if when they made Threads they actually had access to some of these war books that different councils had, because this all seems very much like the Thread stuff. Yeah, so it's obviously going to have people you know, looting and stuff. So it's saying covert warning, so it's saying the people in charge might get a bit more of a forewarning that nuclear weapons are going to go off, but that's going to be before they actually tell people. And then obviously you've only normally got a couple of minutes before a strike goes off because of how fast nuclear war would have happened, like the 8-minute warning or whatever it was. Okay, let's have a look at some more of this. So it's saying, don't start taking all the crisis actions and doing all the shootings and stuff like that until it's absolutely necessary to do that. Again, we've got another one of these, but I think that's very similar to the last one. Again, some of the stuff in here is duplicates, I don't know why. Yeah, you have to revise this book so you know what you're doing. And there's a lot of pages in here. Okay, so a lot of this is sort of thing. So let's go on to some of the other sections in the book, because I said a lot of this is duplicates or very, very similar stuff. So background subjects. Okay, that was some of this stuff here. So background subjects, I think, is just kind of like knowing what what might happen and stuff like this. So let's go on to law and order, because this is what I guess a lot of you want to see. What type of crimes matter? What kind of crimes do not matter? So looting, using violence to get accommodation or supplies, using violence to overcome frustration in queues, traffic jams, etc. So I guess this is where they're coming up with reasons to shoot people. And I think it's saying that, there's stuff like this that they're not even going to care about once nuclear wars happen. Like if you're speeding, if you're building a garage without planning permission, lying about your tax income, there's this selling dud insurance policies. I just find it quite funny that, oh, this is 1972, by the way, there's actually a date there, that they're actually saying all these things that the government normally really cares about, which is making as much money as possible through taxation. They don't care about anymore because there's not any government left to take the money. So it's saying that kind of you do have the right to self-defense a lot more in this scenario, that, if you have people looting you, you can kill them, but... So they basically want groups of vigilantes to patrol the community, to prevent incidents from developing, to restrain violence, to control refugees entering the community, to safeguard local key resources. So, again, you've kind of got militias formed. The idea is that they're protecting assets, not necessarily people. Yet the controller, that's the person, isn't it, who's in charge of everything. Yeah, it's saying it's illegal to do such a thing in normal times, that the police have, sole authority to deal with crimes and things like that, and we have a judicial system, but that goes out the window once you have a thing like this. So let's move on a bit. This is how, obviously, they try and keep order, so again, pause on this if you can read it well enough. It's saying they think the most likely crime is people looting, basically, to deal with actual needs they've got, not sort of, like we're saying, other things that are considered crimes now, which they wouldn't consider crimes. It's interesting here, it says the vigilantes should not be armed, but I think that's because they want the actual council kind of body itself to be the only armed group and the soldiers they control. So it's saying they think that, the people themselves are unlikely to be armed the vigilantes will encounter, so don't give the vigilante guns. It's a stout stick or pickaxe halve, so a pickaxe handle is simple and adequate. So they think all the vigilantes should have pickaxe handles, and as you know, I like pickaxe handles as well, but that's sort of interesting. So yeah, just pause on any of this you want to read in detail. I might start skipping a bit faster through the book soon, because this video is going to take absolutely ages to render and upload, and then YouTube will probably demonetize it anyway. And this is, how do you deal with some of these people once the stuff comes up. Basically, I think all these are exercises to make it easier for people in charge to basically want to kill people, if you kind of read them in a bit more detail. The maintenance of law and order is paramount. Okay, radiation. Let's have a look at this section. So what are they saying about radiation? There is no known way of destroying radioactivity by heat, sterilisation, chemicals or any other means. So basically once something's irradiated, it's irradiated. Distance, density and time are the most important factors in sheltering from the radioactivity. So basically if you're in a shelter that's far away from radioactivity and it's got thick walls and you're in there for as long as possible, not exposing yourself to radiation, you've got the best chances. Similarly, if you're out in the open, exposed to high doses of radiation, that's when you're the most screwed. Because, you know, like contamination time and everything like that. Long-term gamma radiation can penetrate anything. See, again, some of this is very faded, so read it as best you can. A bit about dosimeters, so you know, measuring the dose you've been exposed to. So some stuff about health, so there'll be about water and food supplies in here, I should guess. But as said, pause on any of the bits you want to read. Sewage disposal. Dead bodies, let's read this bit. The dead bodies of animals and humans will have to be disposed of quickly before gross decomposition occurs. This will occur within hours during hot weather. They must be buried under at least 2 feet of soil, and the position used marked well away from water and sources, habitation, etc. Where possible, some form of identification. This systems to protect and survive thing. Their sources of constant danger, and unless they are removed and buried, the area may have to be evacuated. A bit about rodents in here. So basically, because you might not be able to poison them effectively after a nuclear war, you just have to do your hardest to try and not get rats and mice to eat everything. Food poisoning, big chunk on that here. Again, just pause it if you want to read any of this in detail, if you can pick out the text well enough, because as I said, it's not going to be easy reading a lot of this. The health section, so again, I'm not going to be reading any of this in detail now, I'm just going to be flicking through it and you can pause if you want to. Some of this stuff's pretty interesting, showing you how to do latrines and other stuff like that. So this is where all the local resources come from in this bit. This is very out of date now, but it says all the sewage plants in Swindon if you cared. Okay, let's have a look at some of this stuff then. So it's just listing all the different types of fuels and whatever kind of on the table. Control of resources. Yep. Private property should be taken into public ownership if necessary to prevent waste, damage or misuse of because there's any urgent local need for its proper use. So basically if you own anything, the government's going to come and take it. Saying don't guard everything, guard what's more important. Community responsibilities, I'll skip through this bit fairly quickly. Right, and this is where I'll stop it here, because going into this bit is where we have all the names and addresses of people in the actual plan. So there you go. Hopefully this has been useful on the War Emergency Guidebook. As said, hopefully I won't get gulagged from doing a video on this, because this is technically classified documents that I don't know if they've ever been officially declassified, because it's very hard to even get information that they made these things officially, but there you go, they do exist. This is a very elaborate hoax that I got for free, if it is a hoax. But yeah, there you go. That's the War Emergency Guidebook. Lots of people have been requesting for ages. I had a request from a new patron to do a video on it. Originally I had done a video on this, and then I took it down because I thought it was a bit dodgy. I then did another video on it, which I gave to patrons only, but then unfortunately, I think it was VidMe, I hosted it on that site, went down. So I've redone the video, that's all here, so hopefully you find this interesting.